As we see from the tumultuous events in Germany just today, it's pretty clear that Europe stands on the verge of a major disruption. And the Cordon Sanitaire, which is the systematic attempt by elites across Europe to sanitize democracy of everything that contradicts the values of the EU elite, this is beginning to crumble. But the last stand, if you like, I think, there'll be a last push to shore up the cordon. And we should be worried in a bit, because that will be perhaps as kind of brutal and damaging as anything that's gone before. Because for the elites across Europe, there is so much on the line. The fundamental questions facing Europe can no longer be ignored. And the threat to this elite of a radical new set of answers to these questions is so great that they have, as it were, our elites kind of have their backs to the wall. And they are a little like cornered wild animals, perhaps most dangerous when they have their backs to the wall. And so in this short speech, I want to give a little sense of where the Cordon Sanitaire came from, why it cannot hold, as our title has it, and what can we expect if it begins to, as we hope it does, break down. So the Cordon Sanitaire represents, as Frank said, maybe he read my speech, but he said that it's an attempt to isolate European decision makers from popular oversight. And it's been decided by this group of people, certainly not by you and me, we didn't decide it, that certain views and certain parties are so dangerous that they have to be systematically excluded from European public life. And we all know the kind of key core issues on which the contemporary morality police insist that there can be no deviation. The most important is, of course, migration. And this one's especially important because up until now, elites have been relatively successful in drawing a straight line from questions about migration to fascism. And it's allowed them to, our elites has allowed them to LARP as kind of anti-fascists from a previous era, and provided the whole kind of impetus of the Cordon Sanitaire with almost the kind of facsimile of a countercultural energy. They would like to pretend that the Cordon Sanitaire protects people from dangerous anti-democratic leaders, but as we know, it's quite the opposite. The Cordon Sanitaire protects dangerous anti-democratic leaders from ordinary people. But the issue is broader than just with migration, because the Cordon Sanitaire applies to every position which contradicts the mainstream EU position. So to seriously question EU integration, to seriously question destructive environmental policies, or to seriously question the cultural agenda of EU elites. All this invokes the cordon. And I think it's important to grasp this in its totality, because it shows that what this isn't just a debate about policies. This is a confrontation with a system and the system of elites that sustain it. So advocates of the Cordon Sanitaire are so insistent and often so desperate because what they seek to protect is not just a policy position or a particular answer, but as it were, the whole edifice of the contemporary liberal order. And I think here we have to have a bit of honesty, because those on the centre-right who often or sometimes make noises about reducing migration or doing something about environmental policies or improving competitiveness, those people are generally speaking not our allies in dismantling the Cordon Sanitaire. In fact, they're often the most kind of vociferous advocates of the cordon. And one recurring feature of the Cordon Sanitaire is that in the last analysis, these centre-right parties always believe they have more in common with parties of the left or the centre-left than they do with ordinary people like you and me. And so the Cordon Sanitaire, as I've said, comes from this belief that certain positions are too important to the current system. They're kind of key planks of the current order, and that's why they can't be challenged. And elites of all stripes, from the left to the centre-right, they will cling together because they and their interests lie in the continuation of this system. Now, thankfully, the Cordon Sanitaire cannot hold, and it can't hold because it's basically built on a contradiction. Its advocates claim that they're upholding democracy, but it's the results of democratic elections time and again that demonstrate that their views don't command popular support. And only our elites are kind of so stupid to fool themselves that by ignoring or overturning the results of elections that they're defending democracy. And so the Cordon Sanitaire can't hold because people across Europe have simply had enough of being ignored, and they vote with increasing insistence for parties that promise to take their concerns seriously. We've seen what's happening in Germany, but also in France in the recent parliamentary elections. We see that this kind of anti-Cordon Sanitaire is sizable and coherent enough that it poses an existential danger to the governing elites. And in France, the attempt to enforce the Cordon Sanitaire at the last election, although nominally successful, ultimately set about a series of processes that many people think has called into question the entire republic. But aside from kind of the electoral maths, there's a kind of deeper underlying issue that I think is just as important, and that's that the Cordon Sanitaire and its advocates are ideologically exhausted. It's clear that those people who try to enforce the Cordon have no answer to the big questions facing Europe. So at worst, they just kind of double down on failed ideas of the past, like Draghi's idea that the solution to our economic problems is more EU integration. Or in the middle, they kind of rebrand failed ideas to sound a little bit better, like the clean industrial deal. But even at their so-called best, they just provide watered-down versions of ideas stolen from parties outside the Cordon, like if they promise again and again to finally get tough with migration. And we've seen this in the reaction to Trump, that EU elites have almost lost their nerve. They go begging, seeking special protections, or trying to bribe their way out of their problems. I said at the beginning that we can expect a kind of bumpy ride as this carries on, and I think that we can expect our elites to put up one or maybe two kind of last stands. And we've seen this already in the determination that EU elites have shown to control what can and cannot be said. The very first act of the Commission after Trump's inauguration was to announce a whole raft of measures to shore up the DSA and enforce further censorship. They've even come up with a digital version of the Cordon Sanitaire, which they call the Democracy Shield. And this is just the beginning, right? We saw how the DSA was used as part of the rhetorical cover for the cancelling of Romania's election. And we saw the deployment of 250-odd kind of democratic, digital experts to monitor the discussion between Alice Weidel and Elon Musk. And Thierry Breton has promised to pull the same tricks they pulled in Romania should Germany dare to vote the wrong way. And so I have no doubt that the democratic and populist moment in European politics is going to increasingly break down the Cordon Sanitaire, but we have to be ready at the same time for a very serious fight, because they won't let go without one. And here, if I come back to the point I made about this being a confrontation with the whole system, I think those of us in the room who consider ourselves, as much as we consider ourselves populists or nationalists or patriots, we also have to be prepared to confront what is a Europe-wide system. And so this pan-European Cordon Sanitaire requires something of a pan-European response. And so we have to grasp the nettle. We have to dismantle the DSA. We have to overturn the Green Deal in its entirety, not just fiddling around the edges. And we have to take serious action to put on the bonfire the EU's NGO-industrial complex. As I say, what we're facing here is a confrontation with an entire system of elites and system of ideas. The Cordon Sanitaire, right, cannot hold, but we have to be prepared for a very serious fight to give it the last blow. Thank you.